And on that note, Eugene, I do want to bring us to the next segment where we have a very important guest. Her name is Maya Ayache. She is a Lebanese chef who is helping secure aid for those impacted by Israel's aggression on Lebanon, and somebody I know very well. Maya, welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi, Eugene. Hi, Rania. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Well, we're good. We're good. And it's so nice of you to ask, considering that you are in Lebanon right now. And Maya, let's just jump right into it. I saw you just a few weeks ago and everything seemed fine. I mean, there was this simmering conflict, war on the border that we were often talking about, but it seemed to be quite manageable. And a lot of the rest of the country was pretty safe. Business was going on as usual. But since just a few weeks ago, a lot has changed. Israel has carried out several terrorist attacks, blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies. And then, of course, began a carpet bombing campaign across various parts of Lebanon. And so far, 1.2 million people have been displaced, which is just such an insane number for a country as tiny as Lebanon, which I think has about, 6 million people in it. And so that's a huge part of the population that is desperately, trying to secure shelter away from their own homes. And in that time, Israel also killed Secretary General of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, using 85 bombs, including many 2,000-pound U.S. supplied bunker buster bombs to reduce 6 apartment buildings to ash. So a lot has happened. And every single night, we're watching online as this, live stream horror continues. Before all this, you were a very good chef, I should add, in Lebanon. And now, you're helping people who are displaced. So I guess just start off by telling us, how has your life changed since all this started? And what's it like in Lebanon today?
Yeah, so basically living in a country where Israel is the neighbor is just really awful and very difficult because we don't know what their next step is going to be. And they come off a certain way in Western media, and then their actions in Palestine and in Lebanon are totally like just abysmal. And for instance, I mean, what's happened to my Lebanese brothers and sisters in the south and the Dahi and Shia, like I already said, they've been displaced, they've been injured, they have whole families have been wiped out, and they've lost their family homes, and some people spend most of their life savings trying to build these family homes. So it's just, Israel says one thing to the media, and then, they have a completely different agenda, and what they do on the ground is just heinous. And because I don't know if you guys heard this part, but because we don't have a government right now, and there's no humanitarian aid or basic human necessities that's supposed to be provided by the government. People are sleeping all over Beirut, all over Hamra, all over Corniche, in public schools, and people like my friends and myself were just trying to help in any way possible. Yeah, well, I'll get to that later.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a lot to get to here. And one of the things I'm just curious about is, well, Maya, the way that everything is framed here in the United States is Israel is defending itself. Every single statement from every U.S. person about this or in the government has been everything that's happening in Lebanon is just defending. And you're there, you're seeing it happen. And I wonder how you respond to that framing.
So clearly, they're only framing it that way to convince people who have no idea what Lebanon is that it's totally justifiable to carpet bomb and attack a country and kill innocent civilians. In their framing, all civilians are terrorists and hiding rockets in their basements and kitchens. And how the media is framing this doesn't show that they're actual innocent civilians who are dying. It's just collateral damage to them. They're using Hezbollah as an excuse to ethnically cleanse Lebanese people. And any person in the West who's never heard of Palestine or Lebanon is going to look at the news and believe whatever the Western media is spewing, only emboldening Israel's public image, or honestly, whatever is left of it. Also, Israel is doing an amazing job at framing their attacks on Lebanon as a way to save the Lebanese from the nasty Hezbollah, thus making them like white saviors in a country of savages. Also, one more thing is that Israel has been sending evacuation messages on X. Not everybody has X after midnight. They're bombing usually at sunset. They're bombing after dark. They started using white phosphorus in Beirut, not too far from my house, and they've attacked us psychologically, chemically, and through vicious operations, and all of this is justified and even like applauded in the Western media.
That's insane. White
It's just
phosphorus.
horrific. It's just horrific, and I think that's a really good point you made about bombing at night, and also evacuation orders on X or Twitter or whatever you wanna call it. I mean, at literally sometimes 3 AM, and we know in Lebanon we have, electricity cuts. I mean, people how are people supposed to get downstairs if they are? I mean, they shouldn't have to evacuate in the first place, but anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But Maya, I want to ask you, this week there was huge news. It seems like every day there's another massive piece of news that just changes everything. And this week we saw Iran finally struck back at Israel after a long awaited retaliation for many Israeli aggressions, including the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, in the Iranian capital. So we saw Iran fire 180 or so ballistic missiles at Israel, and it kind of stunned the world. So I'm just curious, what was the reaction to that in Lebanon?
You know what? It was nice to have a win after a year of genocide and the last 10 days of absolute horror. This whole genocide, we've seen IDF soldiers and settlers making fun and mocking Palestinian people and Lebanese people. Seeing the reaction of Israeli settlers to the Iranian strikes was hilarious, and the memes that came out of it were the best, honestly. They see these Israeli settlers, they aren't children of war, and they don't know what real conflict is because they live in a snow globe. They don't have an Israel that's been trying to occupy them for the last 75 years. They have no one trying to wipe out their entire bloodlines. They're scared of sirens. But after, like, while that was happening, like, I was talking to my friends, and there's always this fear of like, okay, like, this is great, but there's this fear of like, oh my god, what's going to happen next? It's only going to get worse. And that's because Israel has placed itself on a pedestal.
Yeah.
One question that I think also figures into sort of the double standard idea that I think we've picked up on a couple different points here is this issue of resistance in countries like Lebanon. I mean, you already sort of referred to it, Maya, the sort of Western media framing, the Israeli framing that they're coming in to save Lebanese people from Hezbollah. But it certainly seems that people in Lebanon feel very differently about not only resistance groups in the sort of particular, like groups like Hezbollah, but the general concept of the right to resist against the Israeli expansionism and so on and so forth. So I wonder how you feel about that in this current moment.
I think over the last few days, there's been this whole talk about, Israel's on the border, they're coming in, and they always say that they're going to come in for a little bit and like dip out real quick. But in reality, what their ultimate goal is reoccupation of the South. And America will do anything to let that happen because at the end of the day, we all know that America is Israel's sugar daddy. And they will give them the carte blanche to reoccupy because at the end of the day, honestly, it only benefits America. And how resistance is seen here is definitely different as how it's seen in the States because I don't really think that like people from white imperialist countries really understand what resistance is, and they've turned the meaning of resistance into terrorism. And any sovereign country has no right to be occupied and to be attacked as heavily as Lebanon has multiple times, and they've broken multiple international laws, not like they exist anymore for the last year. And of course, like Lebanon doesn't really have a right to fight back because Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and we're just a bunch of terrorists. And yeah, Americans love to fight injustice, but when it's like in an Arab country, it's totally justified if like Israel's doing it.
I also wanted to ask you about the fact that, the US government, as we know, is arming Israel, gets everything it wants, as you called it, Israel's sugar daddy, which I think is a really good way to frame that relationship. We know that the US is chartering these flights to evacuate Israeli Americans, while Lebanese Americans have been stuck in a situation where they have to fend for themselves with few unavailable commercial options available. And there's of course all of the price gouging taking place. So these like flights that are just 2 hours away from Beirut are like $5,000. Now, Maya, you're Lebanese, but you were also born in the U.S. Do you see a racist element here, as well as in other aspects of this war, some of which you alluded to already?
So I was born in the States, but I don't really identify. This is definitely a racist war. We are Arab, and as many Black presidents as Americans vote into presidency, America still only has the interest of white imperialist countries who they can benefit from. This war is so racist that American politicians and Israeli politicians are still bringing up those 40 dead beheaded babies and all those women that were raped, which has been debunked over and over again and has been spoken about. And they have not muttered a word about the thousands of children that are both dying in Palestine and in Lebanon. And they don't want to help the Lebanese. It would just go against their narrative that all Lebanese people are terrorists, and they want to weaken Lebanon so they can reoccupy it. And America hasn't unequivocally or wholeheartedly denounced what Israel is doing. It's like they're blind, and there's it's just a war of racism at the end of the day, you know. As I said, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. They look like their people in America because most of them are European, so they can identify with them more. So why would they look like Arabs, who obviously in all the Hollywood movies have always been the terrorists and the bad guys? What good would, what could they get out of a small country like Lebanon?
You mentioned it earlier that you have been working on the humanitarian front, and I know this is a topic of great interest to people around the world who are always looking to know how they can potentially help. So, talk to us if you could about some of the organizations you've been working with there in Lebanon who are giving aid on the ground.
Okay, so these are all the I'm going to rattle off a bunch of grassroots initiatives that are working tirelessly day in and day out to make sure that people, not only people displaced from the south, but Syrians affected by this war and migrant workers as well, as they're not sleeping on the ground and they have food to eat and basic necessities. These initiatives are Nation Station, Alib Beirut, Haven for Artists, Suq al-Tayyib, The Great Oven, The Bake Atelier, Beirut Synth Center, Tuned Fork Studios, Mavia Bakery, Hostel Beirut, Jayetna, Barzakh, and Freedom Kitchen. You can find all of these on Instagram, and they most of them have online donation links. And you can always go through me and my Instagram, which is at Maya Noise. You can find most of these donation links as well. But also, Rania and Eugene, you have like individuals, like people like Rana Ramadan and Laya Berri, who've been driving around and they've been seeing and securing it and buying it for them through donations. There's even a coalition of chefs that include Rami Sabban, Samir Maroon, and Mahyiddin al-Jawhari, along with a few others that have also come together to make food and run volunteer groups making meals and figuring out a system to make displaced people in schools more autonomous by securing them provision so they can feed themselves. You also have a good friend of me and Rania's, Ghazala Ajami, who's been going around handing out donations she's been receiving. Karim Jmail, Karma Tabet, and myself have been collecting donations and buying mattresses, blankets, and pillows to hand out to people. May Adra and Taha Jabir have been doing the same and making care packages and handing them out to people who've been displaced, migrant workers, and Syrians in Beirut and Tripoli. And basically, there's so many more that are helping out, and there's so many other initiatives. If you're interested in helping out, please just do a little bit more of a research on Instagram. If you have a Lebanese friend, you can reach out to them, ask them what's going on, and see how they can donate. And you can always donate through to me, and it's going to a good place. And I know all the initiatives, and yeah.
No, no, I want to encourage everyone who's watching to please follow Maya on Instagram at Maya Noise, Maya, the word noise. And because Maya, you're constantly posting about what people can do and how they can help, and also giving very like fun but also depressing but updates with your lovely personality and commentary. But I just wanted to ask you before we wrap here, Maya, do you have anything else you want to say as you're sitting in Lebanon right now? And I'm sure it's nighttime now, and we know Israel bombs viciously at night. So I imagine that there's probably a lot of news coming out about that happening at this very moment.
Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing drones nonstop, and I'm in my village. I'm not in Beirut, so I usually sleep a bit early, and then I wake up to news that like half of the city has been bombed before I can have my morning tea. But I mean, I just have one last thing to say, and this is gonna sound a little bit off tangent, but there is no such thing as Israeli cuisine. And I want everybody to know that there is no such thing as Israeli
Yes.
cuisine. Do more research. Israeli couscous is just maftoul, which is basically muhrabi. Please look into it. And that's all I'd like to leave you with. So, yeah.
Listen, cultural appropriation and cultural erasure is a huge part of these colonial projects. So I appreciate you saying that, Maya. We really appreciate you staying up late and giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you. Thank you so much.